Hello and welcome to Access Chat. I'm delighted to welcome Beatriz Gonzalez today. Beatriz works for SinnerSchrader in Germany and has been collaborating with a bunch of my colleagues and our friends at IAAP on some of the work to internationalize the certifications around accessibility, amongst other things. So you're doing a load of stuff. So Beatriz, great to have you with us. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to work in accessibility, inside leg measurements, all of that kind of stuff? Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, first of all. So, as Neil mentioned, my name is Beatriz Gonzalez Mellidez, and my English speaker friends call me B to make it easier. So, I'm a principal product designer at SinnerSchrader. In German, it's pronounced SinnerSchrader. And this is one of Accenture's interactive creative studios in Germany. So how I started in accessibility? Well, it kind of always was a given for me. I started building websites when I was 17. And soon after, there was a possibility to take a sign language class in Spain when I was living in Malaga. And I always loved languages. So I thought it was really cool to be able to communicate with your hands. That's something we Spanish people do a lot, like Italian and Portuguese probably. And I thought it was kind of a sort of secret superpower. So I studied in the States 1 year as an exchange student, new media and interaction design. And my first year of experience is I learned about usability at work. So I completed an accessibility and usability of web contents program at the University in Madrid. And so back then in Spain, it was a long time ago, I really learned that there is no such thing as usability without accessibility. So I learned this lesson well. And I did interaction design, accessibility, usability, then came user experience, then came universal design, then design for all, inclusive design, design thinking, design sprints, design service design, so gamification, Lego serious play, and all that stuff. And I like to learn new stuff. So right now the latest thing is sustainable UX, which I also got involved. And all in all, these methodologies and approaches for me are just one thing: solving problems, providing enjoyable experiences for the widest audience as possible. So when I explain to people who don't know what all these names are, I usually say that I make people happy. And that involves everyone so that there's no frustration and they can achieve their goals with ease.
I love that. Making people happy. That's wonderful. So you listed so many different methodologies, but ultimately it comes down to I mean, at the base level, it's not making people miserable and it's not excluding them, but I would hope that really good UX does make people happy. So what prompted you to land in Germany and start working in UX in Germany? Because there's definitely a passion for inclusion in Germany, but it's very different kind of culture than in Spain, and different again from UK and US. And this is something that we're really super interested in on Access Chat is the cultural differences, and also making sure that the voices of different countries get included when we're talking about inclusion.
So I actually came in a sabbatical year, and for me doing nothing was too boring. So I thought learning German was hard enough. I did 4 months of German. That was not enough. Super intensive course, 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. And so I decided to stay a bit longer. I finished up to C1 level. And after that, I thought that going back to Spain, it would be a loss of my last year of time learning German. So I decided to look for a job in Germany. So I was looking for something on the sort of usability and user experience, even if it was not a name back then. And the only thing I found was either developer or graphic designer. So, there was more money in web development. and I went that way, the dark path. And I always got a bit of like web development plus usability plus user experience. So I was not doing 100% development. I guess in my career, I am a bit of a mixed, hard to label person. So I was a front-end developer, but I didn't really feel like a developer. I've been a designer, and I never really felt like a designer. And right now I'm pivoting towards more accessibility, and I also don't feel like I am entitled to talk about the topic, because there are so many people out there who know much more and have more lived experiences than I do. So yeah, I came to learn German. I decided to stay. That was 11 years ago. It was hard to go out of the development role because apparently I was a good front-end developer, and people didn't think that if you're a good developer, you can be a good UX person or a good designer. So I found an American company who gave me a chance as a senior user experience architect. That's Pegasystems. And I work as a consultant with them across Europe. And I also work with some countries in the States and Australia and across Southeast Asia. And I work, I think, in 4 different languages and across more than 10 countries in my years there. And then I moved to SinnerSchrader, and my role there is a principal. We are like a com profile, so we know with certain different topics, and then we go in depth in several areas. So a senior usually goes in one topic in depth, but a principal can do more than one. And I guess my topics would be accessibility, inclusive design, and cross-cultural design.
Deborah, I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, I'm not, hopefully I'm not on mute, but welcome to the program, Beatriz. I think that what's so interesting about your work is how, and people like you are the reasons why so much change is happening. So I like that you're giving back to make sure that we can all be successful with accessibility. So, but I'm curious how somebody starts down the path that you started down. I mean, why was this important to you? It's, you know, it's really amazing all that you're doing, but, you know, I was just wondering if you'd explore that a little bit.
So, like I said, I learned usability and user experience together with accessibility. So I always, even if that was not part of the requirements with my customers and my projects, I always baked it in.
Wow. And
sometimes I tried to sell it, and if I found some resistance, I did it anyhow. It was part of the package you got with me. And
did anyone give you a hard time doing that though? Because I have found I've had comments like, well, your website isn't accessible. It's not. Well, you can get on at any time. No, it's accessibility. But then they'll say, oh, well, if you want to include people with disabilities, we'll let you do it for free. It's like, what? No, who are you? Yeah. So it's interesting that you said, well, I'm gonna do it anyway, because it's the right thing to do as a designer, because I don't see everybody doing that. And of course, sometimes you can't do it. For example, I'm not going to mention the company, but I trained a very large telecommunications company and in the United States, and we were training the creators, the designers, the programmers, for example, the content people. And they all sometimes seem to know a lot about accessibility. And so I asked on break, I said, y'all know this. In some cases, they knew ARIA better than I do, because, you know, but it was, they said, because our company doesn't appreciate it when we just do it. They don't want you to take those extra steps. So they actually would get in trouble if they did what you did. Which is ridiculous because it's making it a better product. So I was just curious, as you're showing, which we really appreciate this leadership, you know, how were people reacting? Or maybe they were reacting like, that's great if I don't have to pay for it.
I think the second approach was like, if it's for free, you can give it to me. What you mean is like, you know, the burnt out of the accessibility expert and aficionado. So I guess that there's a point to that. And so what I've done to that, to relieve a bit of the friction there, So I've tried to network within the company and try to find for stakeholders who would support it. So the example within SinnerSchrader and the bigger company Accenture Worldwide, I started a Teams group, and I call it the Digital Accessibility Initiative. And I just Googled our intranet, looking for the keyword accessibility, inclusion, inclusive design, and things like that. And I started inviting people over. It's like, hey, chatting over Teams. What do you think? Would you be interested? I didn't find almost anybody there. So I went to LinkedIn. And then I did another search with all those keywords. And I was just pinging people from the internal Teams chat and saying, hey, I saw you're interested in this. I saw your LinkedIn. Would you be interested? I think we're all very isolated, and sometimes we feel very, very lonely. So we need some type of push and connection, and to see that we are not alone, because that's a very important thing, I would say. And so I started all these during the pandemic, because I realized, like, all my colleagues, we have a skill group within SinnerSchrader we've run since I joined. Some colleagues have started a couple of months before I joined, and people were a bit, not desperate, but like a bit, it's like, oh, what are we doing? Nobody appreciates what we do and things like that. So I was like, okay, let's make this bigger. And then, so I got enough people across, like, I think it was along this first 6 months, we were more than 200 people from States to New Zealand. And with all this data, I also did some surveys trying to find out the project's accessibility state. So I sent it to all the project leaders and within my company to find out the state of their projects and the customers, if they had some accessibility contact, if they have some requirements, in which countries they work for, which are the customers type, like if they work for government or if they work for telecommunications, or what type of things they had included. And with these results, I went to our C-level and say, hey, this is our data. We have these holes. Let's fix it and change a bit of our methodology to move forward. There's also a hole in training. So I asked for budget to buy some DQ licenses. So people could learn at their own pace, and they didn't have to, it shouldn't interfere too much with their daily work, because everyone was very, very stressed out with regular work. And I asked for a certain budget, and they gave me more than I asked for. So that was a great feedback.
Yeah, and that shows what one person can do. One person can do to change a company as, an organization as big as Accenture, who has been very committed to our community. So we appreciate what Accenture has done. Back to you, Neil, or Antonio, I might want to turn the microphone over to you when you're ready.
So, Beatriz, Germany is one of the countries in Europe with one of the oldest population. So it's quite a problem in Germany. And at the same time, you were mentioning the fact that the idea of accessibility, it's something that sometimes people struggle to understand. As working in, what type of changes have you observed in this post-pandemic era that we can consider positive in terms of awareness of the positive impact of creating products or designing websites or designing products that are more accessible?
I actually can give you an example before the pandemic. So in my company, we have several automotive customers. And when I brought the topic, hey, we should be doing accessibility, the reply from the customer and my colleagues was like, hey, blind people don't drive cars. So I prepared a workshop talking about design thinking. Sometimes if they hear accessibility, they just block. But if you talk about design thinking or some other keywords and these bingo buzzwords that are fancy at the moment, they will be more ready to listen. So I did a workshop talking about designing for the extremes. So I also did a talk at the Accessibility Club in Munich, and I'm gonna repeat this several years after the Open University in next December. And so what I presented was a person who commutes daily. He was a white guy driving a very expensive car, like to make it representative, and to touch the points where people would listen. And he was driving his whole day, working from one customer to the other one. He was getting emails, he was getting information, and he was in the car. So the only way to access this information was by using Siri or Google or some type of voice assistant, and to get the screen reader to read it out loud. So he could get all his emails read out loud, and he could surf and find his next amazing, most expensive car in the line by telling his phone, which was connected to the car's audio system, to find what was the next new thing within this brand. So I try to, like adapt. It's like, okay, you say blind people don't drive car. Here you have an example. This is one of your users. He's blind. Not just that, he also has dexterity issues because his hands has to be on the wheel. He's got attention span reduced because he needs to be paying attention to the cars, to the traffic, and to everything else. So he don't have his full attention. And so I was trying to bring down all the possible disabilities that I could join in just one person that they knew as a person that was their customer. And they just got defenseless. I was like, okay, now you get our attention. Let's talk more about this. And that was one of the tricks, dirty tricks that I used.
We like dirty tricks. So that's fantastic. And by the way, certainly I have a friend, a lady called Sandy Wassman. She does buy cars. She's blind. And the point is that actually certainly in the UK, there are allowances, mobility allowances. So if you don't make your website accessible for people who are blind, they're not going to use their mobility allowance to buy your car.
That's the same in Spain. So yeah. I got one of my colleagues in Accenture, Mahfoud, he is blind, and he says his whole family buys cars through him because he gets this money from the government. And of course, he doesn't drive it himself, but he likes his car. Even if he's sitting in another seat, not in the driving wheel, he likes his car to have certain qualities. So he's the one who finds the car that he wants to drive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to say that,
that he wants to be driven, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, but essentially, it's quite interesting. I once, I was friends with the chairman of the RNIB, which is the British Blind Charity, and I picked him up from various different points around for meetings and so on, and he would always comment on the car without, he'd go, "Oh, new car," not seeing it, but just being able to smell the interior, the touch, the feels, the sounds, and everything else. So aesthetics go beyond just vision on these things. So I think that what you did in distilling down all of those disabilities into one customer was great, but actually, yeah, they do actually still have, they don't understand that they have customers that with disabilities too, and that there are these scenarios where they are actually losing direct revenue as well as indirect revenue. So that's great. I know we touched on it already about linguistics and so on. You're super interested in this area. You've contributed to the sort of localization of standards, etc. We're interested in this too, but I mean, what are the gaps that you see and that you think that we need to address as a sort of accessibility community? Because it's very English centric. The UK and the US think we know everything. So what are the things that from outside of our little bubble that you see that you think we could learn, and what also needs translating?
So I'm the typical user of hell for this use case. So I have a German physical laptop with a German keyboard that I have configured to the Spanish keyboard, because in the Spanish keyboard I can do all the German letters specials and all the English ones. And I have English software, US American software. And the dates, so I come from Spain, but we do dates, we do day, so DD/MM month / year. In Germany, they do dots instead of slashes. And in the States, they do first the month / then the month / day / year. And I know because of some friends in Japan, they do year, month, and day. So one thing I always pay very much attention is to forms, to make sure that they are flexible enough so that the user doesn't have the whole cognitive load to try to figure out what a damn format the thing needs. On that sense of not just for inputs, I always pay a lot of attention that has to do with link with accessibility, that it would be, for example, the input types. So if you have an input type date, or if you have an input type email, if you have an input type telephone number or numbers, percentages, and all those types of inputs types in HTML that you have available out of the box, and you don't have to program all the stuff with JavaScript. Because also when you're on a mobile device, or if you're using some type of other interface, the keyboard adapts and you have a better access to the information. And the drop downs, for example, one thing that bugs me a lot is the choose your country drop down. That's a no-go for me because I come from Spain. So Spain is written with ES, so it's Español. Some places the browser translates to your own language, to the browser languages, sometimes to the interface languages, and it's a bit of a pain. And the same happens with Germany. So sometimes it comes as Deutschland, sometimes it comes as Germany. And if I happen to be in a Spanish website booking something, then sometimes it comes as Alemania, which starts with A. So I start moving my fingers up and down, mostly if you're mobile, and it's like, okay, which letter should I search? So I would, in this case, I always recommend to do, type something and let people search for whatever they need, because this is a no-go.
I feel your pain because I'm in the United Kingdom and the scroll wheel only goes one way. So I'm doing this for 5 minutes before I can get.
And you get sore pain, right?
So,
you don't feel your fingers anymore at the end.
Yeah, it's horrible, and obviously there's a bias because although, both Deborah's and my native countries begin with a U, Deborah's is at the top. They rule the world with the scroll
as
wheel.
it should be, should be. And we're number one on the telephone list. We're 001.
Yeah,
So everybody needs to remember we're the best.
That's another one. Sometimes you have to enter the number of your country prefix. Sometimes it allows to type, and it's like, what do you want? I just want to put my phone number, do everything on the back end. Why should I try to figure out what your backend system that is maybe 20 years old wants me to write instead of you doing the work?
Yeah, no, I know we should take away the work from the users. I was smirking when you were talking about the formats and the dates, because we have, or used to have, a terrible Excel form within our organization that would be really horribly inflexible. So you could only put in the date with day / month / year. And if you put in the dots, if you put in that date with dots, it would refuse it. It would just go invalid, right? Once you pressed enter, it would then save the form as day dot month dot year.
I had a requirement.
Words fail me as to how inflexible and unfriendly that is.
And then at the end, it did what you wanted, but you didn't know. You had to struggle with it, right?
Well, no, because essentially, but they want the form to save in the format that you naturally would put it in, but they're refusing to allow you to enter it in that format. It converts it to that format after they force you to use a different one.
Boom.
Yeah. Who thought of that?
I actually had working with Pega. We were doing a new insurance product, and I was interviewing all the people in the call centers. And that way we figure out that they have hard requirements to enter the dates without dots. Because like if you see the German keyboard, the numpad, so you have a comma because our decimals go with commas. And you don't have the dot for the date. So in order to use to do a date with a dot, they had to do the keyboard of the numbers with one hand and use the other hand to put the dot. So it was disrupting their work. So we had to figure out a form so that they put the format without just day, MM, and then year. So then it would turn and put the dots afterwards, because they said, if you don't give us this, we're not going to buy your software. And I was like, great, now we know. So it was good that we found out at the beginning and not at the end. That was a really good win for our team. And they didn't talk about disability. They didn't talk about any special needs or anything like that. They just say, this is how it is. Everyone does it like that. But it's also an accessibility requirement for them. Yeah. Even if they didn't know about that accessibility or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you're removing the likelihood that they're going to get some kind of
errors.
Not just errors, but actually injuries. The more keyboard movements you're making, the more difficult you're making it for people to enter the stuff. And let's face it, the kind of people in call centers are doing really repetitive work.
Yeah.
You're likely to end up with work related to the strain injuries to your hands and carpal tunnel and all this kind of stuff. So there are actually physical injuries that are caused by poor design, even in the digital world.
Yeah,
accessibility saves life.
Yeah, carpal tunnel is a great example.
Yeah.
Yeah, accessibility saves lives.
Yes, it does. And it includes lives.
Yes.
Whatever. How would you like to be excluded? Whoever you are right now, Liz, how would you like to be excluded? How would you like to get in an accident and now you're in a wheelchair? And first thing you got to deal with is how inaccessible society is. So we need heroes like you, Beatriz. Sorry.
Now you remind me of the Microsoft Included Design Guidelines. I always use that because it's so obvious that you have permanent, temporary, and situational scenarios. Like even if you're not disabled today, you're only temporarily abled, because you can be disabled by your environment at one point or another. You're traveling with your suitcase and the elevator and the escalator doesn't work, and you have to drag all your stuff around when you're going to a conference, or you're holding a baby or a big beer, if you don't like babies. So there's always something. Neil, I see you like that example.
I was just thinking, too many beers, you might end up with more babies. You never know.
Oh, yeah. Oktoberfest, that is the #1 baby boom in Germany, I would say.
Yes.
That and Carnival in Cologne.
Yeah, no. So I mean, you're thinking of those alternative use cases. I mean, we've got a good alternative, situational disability use case for speech recognition, where it's being used in nuclear facilities because you can't type with a hazmat suit on. We've been deploying speech recognition inside of reactors.
Awesome.
Wow.
So so I'm hoping that we'll get to do a proper case study on that, because I think it's a really nice one. It's like, so you're situationally disabled because you would be irradiated should you wish to type. So
Neil, but you're talking, you are bringing a topic that's well with what we're talking about, culture, language.
Yeah.
If you are an English speaking person, you benefit from all the tools work in terms of speech to text and text to speech. They work very well in English.
Yes.
They work very poorly in any other language. And if you are talking about minority language, they don't work at all.
Yeah. No, I agreed. I think that it's maybe talk a bit about this, because you'll be trying it out in Spanish and German and so on. I would have thought that Spanish has had at least some love from the speech recognition company.
And I always do. So I have an Echo at home, an Alexa, and I have Siri turned off because it bothers me a lot. I need to try again and give it another shot. But my Alexa, if I try to make it play a song in Spanish, I need to pronounce this as if I were spoken in Germany, or like if I have it set to Germany, I need to move my mouth in a weird form to pronounce the foreign speaking languages, like if it was in the other language. It's like, come on, if I set you up in English, you understand the English words. If I set you up in German, you understand the German words. If I set you up in, I don't know if it's Spanish already. I think it's like since last year, Amazon Alexa and Echo are available in Spanish, and it understands Spanish. But if you get the mix, then you have the problem. Like it goes wild and it doesn't know where to get the data from. I have the autocorrect. And so this typical hashtag dummy autocorrect. When I have the sometimes the German keyboard and sometimes the Spanish keyboard, and I type in any language depending on who I talk to in WhatsApp, iMessage, whatever, and I get some amazingly funny autocorrections because it makes all the languages, and it's like, come on, you should be able to intelligently find out if I'm talking in one language or another. There's like certain cues that after the fourth word that I'm typing down, you should be able to recognize that it's one language or another, and it doesn't work. We're not there yet.
No. So likewise, I mean, I have seen, you know, vast improvement in minority language recognition. It's got a lot better because my wife's Thai, and so, you know, that's not a language that would have had a lot of, you know, investment over, you know, certainly compared to English or Spanish in terms of speech recognition. But now she uses speech recognition all the time in Thai. But Siri hates her in English, right? Because she's not a native speaker, and it doesn't cope very well with non-native accents. So there's still definitely work to do there. And I know Google have been working up with things like Project Euphonia and looking at sort of speech impediments and so on. So it will get better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for sure, it's not there yet. And to take on your point about the language stuff, I work really closely with a German colleague located in France, and we quite often collaborate on documents. And we've got that same thing going on where you've got a mixture of keyboard languages and local languages and everything else. And I'm dyslexic. I rely on spell check. Every time that she logs in and starts using the PowerPoint that I've created, it switches the language and suddenly everything has the squiggly red line on it. So essentially you disable spell check for everybody once you start sharing internationally, because it becomes useless.
Yeah, I have to put it every time I edit a certain paragraph. I need to go to the tools and change the language. So now you're talking about that, and it's funny, you know, my name is not that English friendly. So my iPhone right now, it translates, when I type Beatriz with a Z or Z in the US at the end, it changes it with an X. So it says Beatrix, and I think that's the Dutch version.
Yes.
So I always have a lot of struggles with my name. I have two family names. The first of my father first, Gonzalez, and the first of my mother second, that is Mellidez. And when I try to fill a form, sometimes they only accept one surname and no spaces. So I don't have a dash, I don't have any other, they're not together, they are one surname, space, a second surname, and it doesn't accept my language. I read in Twitter there were some threads about cultural aggression. Like there was one person who was called Joe, Yao, that's it. And it's like, no, you can't, your name is not allowed, you need to input at least 3 characters. It's like, come on. And then there was some, I don't remember the name right now. I think it was a very common Chinese familial name, like in Spain it would be Gonzalez, or in Sweden it could be Johannesson. So it was like a very, very common, and it was not allowed. So there's also some names that if you translate it to English, they can sound like curse words. So they're also not allowed. And it's like, come on, that is my name. Who are you to say my name is not allowed? So when I fly, I never know what name I input. So my name has, we call it tildes. I think in English you call it accent. So it has a little line on the top of the A and the I in Mellidez. So both of them have one of those. Those symbols are not allowed. And then sometimes I put it without the tildes. I guess Antonio is laughing because I guess the cedil in Portuguese could be probably the same.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes I put it to no space, so I put Gonzalez Mellidez together, sometimes without accents. Then it tells me, no, but it's too long. You're not allowed to enter such a name so long. So then I have to, okay, I go for Gonzalez. And, you know, I have to try out until the system allows me to enter my name in the way they like it. It's like, why?
Well, your parents should have given you a better name that worked with the system.
Yeah, it's all my parents' fault, right? It always goes back to probably my mother. It's always the mother's fault.
Right. And it's insulting to the Latin community as well. And it's that you're not the only community that uses different names, but it's It's such a very important thing that I haven't thought about in the way you're presenting it. I mean, as soon as you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, but it shows just the nuance of the problems. It's really nuanced. That is a huge problem if you think about it. And I know we were teasing before we got online, but and I think we did it too about online, where we were talking about how America's #1, which everybody knows that. Just kidding. I was talking to somebody from Canada the other day, and I said, well, you're an American. And she's like, oh, no, I'm Canadian. I said, well, you're actually part of North America, but we just hijacked the American name. But it's just interesting because there's so many moving parts to this, and it really dives into identity. Is it, because now that I've been doing this, we've been doing this 8 years now.
We're in our 8th year, yes.
In our 8th year. And I've learned so much as an American doing this talk, because there are things like, I remember the first time I heard somebody complain about the United States being the first in the line. I'd never thought about it. I always thought it's very convenient that mine is right there. And let me tell you, we complain because there's so many that aren't doing that now because it's stupid. But regardless, we're like, oh my God, I actually am going to have to go down the list. But the first person that complained to me about it or was making fun of us about it was a gentleman, I think from Spain, of course, because they're so smart too. And he was like, you Americans are so, and I had never thought about it because it's just something we always knew. And I've heard Antonio and Neil make comments about technology companies in the United States. A lot of the social media companies are in the United States and the preference that they show Americans. And I was like, at first when they said it, I was like, oh, that's not that. Yeah. Okay. You're right. That is happening. And now that I know it, I can't unknow it. And I really want to call BS on all Americans, because we are one country, part of a beautiful world, and we need to join it, including honoring your entire name.
That's not the same. I'm going to tell you an example in Germany that happened to me a couple of months ago. So my Krankenkasse, my social insurance, my social security, I've been a member for the last 10 years. I've been paying regularly, so they got my money. There was no problem on that. And I changed my phone. So I needed to identify myself in the app to make sure that my health data was protected and stuff. So I tried to get recognized. I've done it over the computer several times with different systems in Germany. Like there's like post identification, and then you get to a post person, they make a video, you show them your ID and it works. In this way, my company for insurance, they had bought a system, and they only gave the system the possibility to identify with a German ID or with an official German ID for people who are not German. The thing is, I am European. I don't need any of those documents. I have my Spanish ID, I have my passport. It didn't allow me to register with my passport. It didn't allow me to register with my Spanish ID. So they told me after several months back and forth, a Twitter shitstorm and more questions. And they told me in the middle of the pandemic, no, you have to come to one of our locations and show your face so that we can identify it is you.
Oh my God.
So that was last year. I haven't done it yet.
Well, yeah.
It's like, and the company who sold them this identification system said, we accept passports, we accept Spanish IDs and all sorts of IDs. It's just the customer who hasn't required that. So the problem is not US or German. It's like, if you have teams that are not inclusive, you don't have people with different backgrounds, different abilities, different experiences, you don't see that. And if you don't do a proper research with including people who know what they're talking about, it's not people who fake that they know what they're talking about, people who actually know because they experience themselves, then you don't know. You only know what you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, your work is amazing. I'm so impressed with where you've taken the work, because this is and you know what, I know that we never thought that Access Chat was we were gonna work ourselves out of a volunteer job, since we volunteer for this, but because how many topics can you do on this? Well, oh my gosh. I mean, it just, what you brought up during this interview, it was brilliant because it just continues to show us the problems. And thank goodness we have people like you leading the way. Neil always seems to find the smartest people. I'm like, wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah,
So,
the end is a system. We're all linked. We all belong to the
Yeah.
same thing. And it's not just accessibility isolated. It's not silos. There's always a connection.
Yeah.
yes,
Well,
yes, I agree. I agree.
that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break down the silos, make those connections. We've overrun. There's a surprise. So great chat today. I need to thank our supporters, Barclays Access, Microlink, MyClearText for keeping us on air, captioned, and you know, fed and watered, and the electric on. So thank you all for being supporters over goodness knows how many years. And Beatriz, thank you. We'll look forward to you joining us on Twitter on Tuesday.
Looking
Thank you.
forward to it.